All right, let's dive into a story today that is, well, it's pretty chilling. It sits at this terrifying intersection of family, wealth, and an evil that is just unspeakable. It's a tale that kicks off with a life of comfort and ends in a chamber of absolute horror. This entire story really just boils down to this one single question. What are you willing to do for good fortune? Seriously, what is the ultimate price of luck? For one family in the Philippines, the answer was, well, it was everything. So we see this all unfold through the eyes of a young man who calls himself Grill. He's living a pretty comfortable, if kind of quiet, life on this huge estate in Bohol. He was raised by his uncle after his parents died under mysterious circumstances. Now, Grill's uncle, a guy named Tiyo Heron, is loaded. We're talking acres and acres of land, thriving with crops and livestock, the whole 9 yards. To the outside world, he's just this respected figure who, got really lucky in life. But Grill, living right there under his roof, always felt like something was off. Where all this incredible wealth came from was just never really explained. On this massive property, there was this one small cement warehouse that was just always locked. Tio Haran was the only one who had a key, and he made it crystal clear that no one, especially Girl, was ever allowed to go inside. It was just this silent, ominous building, sitting there in an otherwise perfect life. And then, one night, that mystery takes a seriously horrifying turn. Grill is woken up by the caretaker's dogs, just barking like crazy. He looks out his window, and he sees his uncle, a strange car, and a woman. She's blindfolded and gagged, and she's being dragged into that forbidden warehouse. The car speeds away, the door is locked, and Grill is left staring out his window, suddenly living in a terrifying new reality. What Grill saw that night just completely shattered the illusion of his life. He knew he had to figure out what was happening, and his first move was to confront the only other person on the property who might know the truth, the family's longtime caretaker. Grill was now stuck trying to reconcile two completely different versions of his uncle. On one hand, you have the respected Tiyo Heron, this pillar of the community whose success was chalked up to good look. But on the other hand, you have a man who drags a kidnapped woman into a locked warehouse in the middle of the night. For Grill, these two realities just could not exist in the same person anymore. So when Grill went to the caretaker, Mang Poldo, he was basically met with a wall of fear. Mang Poldo admitted he saw it too, but he begged Grill to just ignore it. His panicked warning to just leave your uncle be only made Grill more suspicious that this was not the first time something like this had happened. But Grill couldn't let it go. How could he? He kept pushing. He revealed that he'd been spying on the warehouse himself and heard his uncle furious that the kidnapped woman, a distant relative, wasn't acceptable. That's when Mang Poldo, cornered and seeing Grill's determination, finally just broke down. He confessed the family's terrible, terrible secret. And the truth was so much more horrifying than Grill could have ever imagined. Tiyo Heron's fortune wasn't luck at all. It was the result of a demonic pact. He had joined a cult, learned a ritual to summon a demon for incredible wealth, and the price was blood. Specifically, the blood of his own relatives. Mang Poldo just laid out the full, awful scope of it. The cult, the ritual. He explained that the kidnapped woman was rejected by the demon because her bloodline was too distant. Then, he voiced the darkest suspicion of all, that Grill's parents had very likely been previous sacrifices. And then came the final chilling warning. Grill himself was next. Overwhelmed by everything he just revealed, Mang Poldo summed up the man they both served with two simple, terrifying words. Your uncle is a devil. I mean, what other explanation is there for a man who would sacrifice his own family for money? Faced with this completely unbelievable truth, Grill knew he couldn't just take the caretaker's word for it. He had to see it himself. He needed to witness the source of his family's fortune and his parents' demise. He didn't have to wait long. Hiding outside the warehouse, peering through a tiny screened opening, Grill watched the entire gruesome act unfold. A young man was lured inside, struck down, and his blood was drained into a basin. Then, in a truly sickening act, Tiyo Heron cut out the man's heart and ate it raw, before chanting an invocation to a horrifying statue of a horned, winged demon. And then, a voice answered. It wasn't human. It seemed to come from the statue, from the ground itself. The demon spoke, telling Tiyo Heron the sacrifice wasn't good enough, that the blessing would be temporary. It demanded a true blood relative, a sacrifice just like the one Tiyo Heron had made before, his own sibling. In that one moment, Grill knew for certain his uncle had murdered his father. The confirmation of his parents' murder just transformed Grill's horror into a burning rage. He went back to Mang Poldo, not as a scared boy, but as a man looking for vengeance. And together, the two of them, the nephew and the terrified caretaker, forged a pact of their own.
Mang Poldo revealed a critical weakness. See, Tiyo Heron was protected by his dark master, but that power was at its absolute lowest point during the ritual itself, right as he was about to make a sacrifice. Their plan was as simple as it was dangerous. They would let the ritual begin. They would let Tiyo Heron prepare to kill Grill, and in that single moment of vulnerability, they would strike.
About a month passed. Then, the moment came. Tiyo Heron approached Grill, smiling, telling him he had a wonderful surprise waiting in the warehouse. Playing his part, Grill pretended to be excited and walked toward the altar of his own execution. He sat on the stool as his uncle grabbed the sacrificial below knife, its polished blade gleaming in the candlelight. And then Tiyo Heron raised the weapon high for the killing blow. But the blade never fell. Instead, the sound of a single gunshot just ripped through the silence. Tiyo Heron collapsed, dead. Standing in the shadows holding a revolver was Mang Poldo. He had saved Grill's life. So the nightmare was over, but the real work had just begun. Grill was now the sole heir to a fortune built on the blood of his own family. He had to figure out what to do with this cursed inheritance. To cover their tracks, they burned the warehouse down, staging Tiyo Heron's death as a suicide. Grill legally inherited everything, but instead of keeping the cursed fortune, he hired lawyers and systematically gave it all away to his extended family, prioritizing the relatives of his uncle's victims. He took only what he needed to start over, and then he just vanished. Grill got a kind of justice, and he was finally free from his uncle's shadow. But freedom doesn't just erase the scars, you know? The memory of what he saw and the truth of what happened to his parents, that would be a weight he'd have to carry for the rest of his life. And this brings us right back to our central question. Grill did everything he could to wash the blood from his family's money, to turn a cursed fortune into a force for reparations. But does that truly cleanse it? Can an evil origin ever be completely erased? That is definitely something to think about.